All right, welcome to the fourth and final game of the evening. Up this time is Old Skies, a time travel adventure spanning 200 years. Dive into the past with time agent Thea Quinn as she embarks on 7 trips through time. History is up for grabs, from the speakeasies of Prohibition to the vicious gangs of the Gilded Age to the World Trade Center on September 10th, 2001. Right. So, first of all, we did an interview with the creator of this game, Dave Gilbert, a few months ago, back in January, as I recall. That interview is in our archive on YouTube. Probably just type Fragments of Silicon, watch die, and it should pop up. Um, Putting that aside, Old Skies here is the first game by Dave Gilbert in 5 years since Unavowed, a game we also covered back in the day. Um, Honestly, like Wajidai is a regular in our reviews. It's actually been a while since they put out anything, developed or published. Last game here was the excavation of Hobbs Barrow, which we did review, but that was 3 years ago. So it's been a while since they've appeared on our program. And what they have here, I want to say, is their most ambitious adventure game to date. But I don't know if I can. I'm like, strictly speaking, I think Unavowed was more ambitious. If only because Unavowed was trying to do rather new things with the actual adventure game mechanics, from what I recall. Old Skies here isn't quite that bold in terms of how it delivers an adventure game puzzle. In fact, by adventure game standards, this game is pretty simplistic. Not narrative adventure or walking simulator levels of gameplay here. There are actual puzzles that require actual thought to suss out. But you're not going to get any sort of, big spanning puzzles that require a whole bunch of items that need to be combined in order to unlock something or progress. Nothing that elaborate, which honestly is a good thing in my estimation, because those puzzles are pretty infamous for getting very dicey with the logic. Because, especially, like one of your examples is from Gabriel Knight 3. The one with the passport photo, where the picture of the guy doesn't even have a mustache. You got to put on a mustache to match up the picture for some reason. You won't have to worry about that kind of space logic here, which is actually kind of remarkable for an adventure game dealing with time travel. Like, no. In fact, inventory puzzles are kept to a minimum. They are there, but they're very basic. Once again, not a big problem. No, the kind of puzzle that Old Skies likes to favor, surprisingly doesn't involve time travel either. you will get the occasional, you will have to jut about from two different time locations, um like the Gilded Age. You will have to transport from a span of 6 months uh, in order to complete the later stages of that episode, for example. So that is a factor in the puzzle solving. But no, the signature puzzle, uh, I would say, is, I'm not exactly sure what to name it, but it's kind of conversational puzzles, like a lot, like some sort of code that requires the rule of three. Like there are, there's like a phrase you might have to learn, and you need 3 parts of it. This game likes that kind of puzzle a lot because you will see it over and over again in various permutations. Once again, not a bad thing. Um, in fact, I thought the puzzle design was quite lovely here. Um, complex without getting into the thornier side of adventure games. Because it keeps things localized as well. Like, no one episode is too big. Like, there isn't like a whole bunch of areas to visit. It's got a lot of modern adventure game features. There is an internal hint system, as you have to, like, you are always in contact with your, for lack of a better term, time spotter, Nazo, who, if prompted, will give you a hint in the right direction. Also, pixel hunts are pretty much a thing of the past. What with hotspot locators, like, so it's as a adventure game, it's a fairly solid affair. Um, as a time travel story, like, it's always complicated. That's just the nature of time travel. Because, what are your time travel rules? And this is actually this is, if nothing else, a unique take on time travel.
Mm,
And that is, what if time travel was a regular 9 to 5 job? Okay, a bit more than that in terms of dedication. It's actually a central focal point to the overreaching narrative of Old Skies. But I can't dive too much into that theme because, once again, that spans the whole game, and it's a really big part of the ending parts.
mm,
So, and this game just came out, so um, adventure games in particular are marred by the spoiling of story plot points. Um, it's important to keep that in mind. But you know, usually when it comes to time travel, it's, we've just discovered it, um, or we've only got to use it for special occasions. A morality play on the potential abuses of time travel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This one this one asks, what if causality wasn't so fragile? You know, mind you, it's still a thing.
mm,
but the world is just kind of shrugged in some respects, because another big theme of Old Skies is chrono shifting, if I'm remembering the terminology correctly. That is, alternate timelines are popping up all over the place.
Yeah, because I would imagine if you stopped 9/11 from happening, that would cause a very big timeline shift.
Well, that is specifically addressed in the game. Like, an event like 9/11 or killing Hitler, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why don't you use time travel to fix that?
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the usual defenses apply. Um, you know, there are too many things that would get altered in too many unpredictable ways. To in the specific case of 9/11, they mentioned, if they started saving loved ones from 9/11, then the entire fucking zone would be flooded with time travelers.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it all checks out.
Because a lot of people fail to realize just how many people died on 9/11. That would be a
Right.
fucking shit show.
Yes. And I won't go into too much detail, but one of the later adventures is about what happens when you start to get fucky with the time rules. Not interfering with high ranking. That's another one.
Mm-hmm.
It's dealing with paradoxes.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I felt that one was where the time writing was at its weakest, but it's not surprising because, once again, context free. This episode is one of the main things is about dealing with paradoxes that Thea Quinn keeps causing and how to get out of that. The problem is the writing didn't realize it had set up a closed loop. Like, it was actually kind of stunning because all the elements were there. Like, it was doing the things where, okay, why did this thing happen? Oh, it turns out another self was behind that event. Which means all of this has happened, all of this has transpired, and therefore everything is always going to play out like this.
Oh boy.
This is just the dangers of writing with time travel.
Mm-hmm.
It is a headache.
Yes.
I have made some attempts towards it, and does it count as a crutch if you invented literally a god whose job is to freaking make time travel, not make the universe end?
When it comes to time travel, I am pretty forgiving when it comes to getting lost in the particulars, because it's a lot to keep track of, and this game is dealing with 200 years of history. So it's a lot to keep track of.
Mm-hmm.
And while it's mainly episodic, there are elements that will carry over from episode to episode. There are things that are building, not just narratively, but in terms of your actions in time. So I would expect no less than, sometimes getting lost in the time weeds, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, the ultimate point here is I don't think this game commits any egregious time sin. as it were. For the honestly, the biggest writing problem I saw had nothing to do with time. Well, I can't exactly say that, but it was more a subset of time, let's say, and more to do with fucking security. Because it's like I saw the endpoint right then and there, and I'm just like, okay, this isn't really jibing because the area that this particular event happens should be really fucking secure because there's a time machine there. I'm like, I do wish I could talk about this more because it really fucking bugged me. But I can't because it is it's a pretty big part of one of the episodes. Once again, this is a bit of the frustration of having to do this spoiler free because there are things I very much want to talk about. But I can't. Especially like the deeper themes. As what are the long-term psychological ramifications to being a time agent? That's something that's explored, which is honestly a very fresh breath of air when it comes to time stories, because quite frankly, that's not a perspective you see. You don't get somebody who's traveling through time for 10, 15, 20 years too often. I won't say it's unprecedented or anything, but it's not the norm by any stretch. And this game does postulate to ask, what does that do to a person? Can they really shut everything off and dedicate themselves to the job? Because an element I haven't talked about yet is while chrono shifts are commonplace, not everything chrono shifts. There are things that are chrono locked, as they call them in game. There are areas that are frozen in time, basically. Anything that's done to the time stream, these things stay. Places, books, people, the time agents. By the nature of the job, they are the same person that they were at the start of their career. While simultaneously their alternate timeline self exists in that particular time world. It's less of an issue than you might think. It's actually more of a background element most of the time. And this game asks a lot of different time questions and handles it surprisingly well. Like I said, this is a complex type of storytelling you're dealing with here. And it's something of a miracle that this game did not lose itself in in crisscrossing. I suspect that's a big reason why this game is mainly episodic. To keep those elements from getting too tangled. So I think that was the right choice there. Another thing to mention is you can die in Old Sky.
Oh,
there's a catch to it. There is a I forget the in-game terminology, but you have a rewind function. If you get killed or in a state that appears like death, you will rewind at most 30 minutes.
I see.
That's actually something that comes into play with the very last puzzle in the game. Which is very elaborate, but still not lost in the logic loops.
Hmm.
I will always I will always commend a point and click adventure game. When it keeps its logic mostly straight. Because I've seen the dark side of that. I grew up on Sierra games, so I know what that looks like. Well, keeping things vague, I suppose the thing that disappointed me the most was the ending. Now, I've seen people rave about the ending, but it left me cold, and I couldn't exactly articulate why either. Maybe it's because the emotional catharsis or the emotional climax was a bit before that, and I was strangely not given a choice there when ordinarily, not just here, but in other adventure games, it's the kind of thing where I would have been given a choice and also left ambiguous. Because, there was a certain action I wanted to do. And I am very annoyed that I didn't get to do it. Oh, right. Unrelated. You also have a way to fix the time stream that involves a laser pistol, basically. Yeah. It's basically a time eraser. Like, you point at a person and, they're a big enough threat to the timeline and a low enough level, and you will be able to erase them from existence. Not just shoot them dead. You are no longer here. Not for all time. You existed beforehand, but if if you are obliterated, you don't leave a body. It's quite literal in the terms of erasure. Like, you will still leave a record, though. All in all, probably the best game I've played thus far this year. My own personal hang-ups about it aside, which are quite frankly fairly minor in the grand scheme of things. Aside from all that, the production values were genuinely surprising to me. Like, I am constantly amazed at what Wajidai can do with the adventure game engine, or the ADG engine, I think it's called. Especially when you look at the early work. Like, I thought this was a Unity game when we were doing the interview back in January. And this may be the highest resolution ADG game to date. Granted, I don't follow every release that uses this particular engine. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, Rosewater, which will become relevant in a few weeks, but is at the same resolution. But this is full 1080p, which is 3 times the graphical fidelity of Unavowed. I'm sure some people are going to complain that it's not native 4K, but it's not a AAA game. It doesn't need to be 4K. No, it's like 4K. I won't say it's useless, but you actually need a really big display to get actual differences. And a game like Unavowed pushing 1080p is fine. Now, so I did like the touch of Fia's outfit changing depending on the time period. Music is. Do you like smooth jazz? Then this is the soundtrack for you. Pretty cheap too. Anyway, so in terms of pricing, this game clocks in at a very modest $20. Now, this is a game I could have seen at $30. Like, I think it does have the production values, both graphical and oral, and the content, where it could have tried the $25 to $30 range and been successful at it. But they did not push the envelope there, which just highlights how mystifying World of Goo 2's $30 price tag is to me. Anyway, as far as is Old Skies recommended at $20? I suppose I can put it simply. Highest recommendation I can give to this game, just in general, and in terms of its pricing. Even its soundtrack is fairly modest, clocking in at $3 or $2.69 currently. It's on sale for $17.99. It's one of the best games in a sea of really good games, because there was a lot of games that of quality that came out this week. And it also helps that it's a point-and-click adventure game, so it's got the counter programming to its existence. Like, the person who's playing the Oblivion remaster or Expedition 33 may not be the same kind of player that's looking for a point-and-click adventure game. That's what I'm saying. Honestly, this is the kind of game that World of Goo 2 has to fear more than those. Anyway, so any questions, comments, or concerns?
I think I'm good.
Sorry, I had my mic muted. I'm fine.
All right. So yeah, as far as like game of the year, we really don't like doing that these days, but it's probably going to be one of the top games recommended when we do the year-end stuff. So that aside, that will about do it for not just this review session, but sorry, not just this review, but this review session. It's getting late. Anyway, so coming up on the week ahead, On Wednesday, April 30th, we'll be welcoming Tess Wainwright of Urisoft. We were supposed to have her a few weeks back. She got sick, so we're doing it now. We'll be talking about their first game, Songbird Guild. Walking the streets of Larimar City doesn't give you many clues that something is wrong. However, those who venture outside the city's faux simulation of a bright blue sky know that the rest of the world wasn't so lucky. We call these adventurers magical girls, and their efforts have allowed these small patches of civilization to survive. Also, I believe this is going to be a visual novel. Always weird when we do one of those and it's not from Manga Gamer. And also, yes, Yuri is referring to gay girls and not the Russian Slavic name. So that is happening on Wednesday. We do also have a new episode of MSP happening as well. Getting close to the end of that season. We do have a Friday show happening. On Friday, May 2nd, we're having Eric Rimpen of Silk Softworks, creator of the games Kaninga, Seeds of Civilization, and Shantytown. We'll be focusing on Shantytown. So, as always, look forward to those. And until next time, I shall wish you good gaming.